Maybe the best album of the year.
Okay. Pretty high praise. Thanks.
Good.
When we come back, Frank Zappa and the 62-year-old grandmother who adds the shriek to heavy metal, and Billy Preston and the band next.
Well, nobody needs to teach Frank Zappa how to scream. We'll be right back with him in our weekly discussion right after this.
Have you heard the news?
Have you heard the news? The rock and roll evening news.
We're back. And joining us tonight in our weekly discussion with our reporters, Bob Hilburn and Richard Blade, is Frank Zappa. Frank, thanks for being with us, first of all. You've seen a lot of changes in the music business throughout your career. In fact, your music has changed a great deal as well. But we don't hear a lot of your music on the radio anymore like we did in the mid-'70s. And so the question we want to ask is, has FM radio, which I think originally was started to combat AM's tight formats, become too formatted itself?
And the answer is yes.
You believe so?
Yes.
Why?
Well, all you have to do is listen to it. It's just like AM radio and stereo. They have a condensed playlist, and I don't think it's going to change because the narrowcasting concept.
Why do you think it happened in the first place? Originally when FM began, or when FM became really popular, you heard things on FM that you wouldn't hear anywhere else.
Well, with any new medium, okay, when it begins, people will experiment, right? But as soon as somebody makes some money on it, they squeeze it down and it gets blanded out. Happened in television. Look at the tapes of early television and some of the stuff that was going on there. Do you see anything on television now that resembles that kind of experimentation?
Well, Frank, what is the danger or the message of this to the health of music? Does it hurt it, do you think? I mean, the fact that kids can hear a variety of music instead of just hearing a single sound all the time on the same station?
Well, the secret message is, if you want to be a musician, you have to play only these kinds of songs, otherwise you won't get on the radio. So when a person is learning to do music, his training is going to be directed toward the ultimate result in his career. So a guy in a garage band, instead of using his imagination, thinks more about what it's going to take to get on the radio station that he listens to, and that means blanding out.
Do you see any end to that cycle?
Not unless people who own the licenses take more chances. And if you look around and see who owns the licenses, you have groups of doctors who will buy them, or corporations who buy them, and they're bought and sold like pieces of real estate. It's not about music.
What's the challenge for you as a musician, and how do you get around that tight format?
One thing that you do is you look for other ways in which to let people know that your music exists. I happen to have a mail order company, and for those places in the United States where the records won't even get into stores, we make it available by mail. And the other thing you do is you have to advertise the product using tools other than radio.
But maybe we should ask Richard his 2 cents worth, since you are a DJ. Tell us what you think.
I think it's hard to avoid formats, because if you try and play music that is different to what the station is used to playing, it's the listeners that call up and complain. For example, we played Van Halen's Jump on K-Rock, and I had so many complaints on the listener line, the request line. Get this stuff off the radio. I think the song was great. It went to #1, and it was, I think, the biggest hit Van Halen ever had. But the audience for one particular radio station didn't want to hear it. And it's the listeners that very much determine what get played, because if the listeners want to hear something and you play it, your ratings go up. If they don't want to hear it and you don't play it, your ratings go down.
That's true, but in terms of K-Rock, that has had a more of an experimental background. So what you're talking about here is a kind of a pop-oriented song being played on a station that had more of an experimental background and an experimental audience.
In a way, though, it's a backfire. You know, we're willing to experiment, and then suddenly the experiment backfires when you're not allowed to play the mainstream. The listeners say, keep experimenting.
But
I need to move on to another issue. Sorry to interrupt. Okay. I noticed that close to half the artists on this week's Top 40 album chart are over 35. I'd like to ask you a question. How can I put this delicately? Are rockers getting too old? Are they, I know there's no way of avoiding that, but what about the teenagers and the people that they identified with? You know, the younger singers.
Well, there's plenty of them to go around. What's on the radio is a result of programming decisions. It's not that there aren't any young people making rock and roll. You have two things to consider. One, if the bulk of the people on the charts are in that age bracket, it's telling you two things. One, that they know what they're doing. They made a record that somebody wants to hear, otherwise they wouldn't listen to it. So it's okay to be old and still make rock and roll music. Two, it's telling you that somebody put a lot of money into getting those things on the radio, and maybe the younger people don't have the same kind of promotional push that is behind the people who have been doing it for more years and have a better track record.
Was your family surprised at the success that Moon had back in, I think, 81, 82 with Valley Girls?
The only person who wasn't surprised was Moon. Everybody else in the record business was very surprised, and actually K-Rock was the station that made that record happen, because the very first time it went on the air was played as an acetate. It wasn't even released, and it was a hit right away, just by accident, and the other stations in the area had taped it off the air from K-Rock and carded it so that they could play it too. It wasn't even released when it first came out.
Frank, if I can ask about promotion, you said the importance of a lot of dollars in getting something on the radio. How much do you think independent promotion is responsible for getting hits on the radio? Do you think that it really distorts the whole music system by doing that?
The system itself is based on the exchange of money, and believe me, I have nothing against commerce. I'm a devout capitalist myself. But when the decision between, say you have two songs of equal value, and one of them gets played because somebody goes nudge, nudge, wink, wink in material terms, that disturbs me.
But do you think those federal investigations are going to really get into that at all?
I think that when you look at who's behind those investigations and examine his motivations, you would wonder whether or not it's anything more than politics.
Just one quick question to you. You view the music scene now, and you were such a part of the music scene and the whole experimental music scene which came out at the beginning of the 70s. How do you rate today's music?
It's very derivative, but then again, the rest of society is very derivative. You have people wearing copies of clothing that comes from other eras. You have people terrified to experiment, terrified to do something that is actually new because nobody gives them any incentive to do it. The music, pop music has always reflected things about the society, some of them you don't want to know, like who we really are and what we're really doing. I think basically you have the potential of doing great music with all the new technical tools, but the potential of doing boring things with all the new broadcasting trends.
Very quickly, congratulations to you for writing for opera as well. I don't think a lot of people know that, but congratulations.
And anyone you especially admire today musically?
I like Alan Holdsworth.
Thanks, Frank Zappa, for joining us in our weekly discussion, and thanks, too, to Bob Hilburn and Richard Blade. Each week we give you, the viewer, a chance to air your views on subjects we discuss on the show, and tonight, very briefly, we discussed about rock stars getting too old. We want to ask you that question. If you think they are getting too old, dial 1-900-210-3280, and if you think they aren't and can still rock with the best of them, call 1-900-210-3284. We'll give you the results on next week's show. Phone company's going to charge you 50 cents for each call, and our portion of any profits will be donated to charity. Last week we asked you a question: if rock stars hurt their image by appearing in commercials, and 71% of you told us no, they don't. 29% of you voted yes, they do hurt their image by endorsing products on TV. And we'll be right back to wrap it up with more from Billy Preston.